Ladies and gentlemen, Jack Mabon.
Thanks, DC. I just want to say that it's a tremendous honor for me to talk to you all on behalf of my family, the Mabons, on this very memorable event for a very extraordinary individual, my Uncle Tom, Monsignor Mabon. I want to start by thanking the priests, his fellow priests who have taken the time to come out here and honor him on his big day, as well as, and certainly not least, the parish of Mother Sorrows and the energy and the parishioners that you guys have shown, to put this event on. I really am thankful of that, and I tip my hat to your organization and your energy that you put into this. So, as DC mentioned, I've been asked to speak on behalf of the family, and well, when I think of my Uncle Tom, I think the first thing I think about is his sense of humor. It was always a grand time and an event that was looked forward to every time my Uncle Tom came to visit my family, 405 South Street in Johnstown. He usually came about once a month, but it was always full of laughs. It was always guaranteed to have a bunch of laughs. And I think the only one that didn't like it was my dog Cassius, who made it a practice of chewing his shoes. I think he went through more shoes after visiting our house than any other way. But the other thing I remember about him is, and the baby boomers in this room will appreciate, Karnak the Magnificent. He was a character on the Johnny Carson show that played by Johnny Carson, and I think, several references have been made to Uncle Tom naming several cats after Karnak the Magnificent, and let's see if I can get this right. Rosie O'Donnell's thighs and the price of gasoline. Name two things that are likely to double within the end of the year. Well, we had gone to many Mabon and McNeilis reunions along the years, and he didn't think I was listening, but there were a lot of stories told, and so I'll apologize in advance that if there are some inside Mabon stories that I share with you tonight, they really did happen, but you may not understand them because you may need to know some of the background. But my Uncle Tom was he had a sense of humor, I think from the Mabons since he was a little kid, and I heard this from first-hand observers. He was the kid down on Main Street that, when he was about 4 years old, would take his tricycle and ride around the neighborhood. And he would just charm these ladies in the neighborhood to give them cookies and milk for a little bit of conversation, and that's how it started. And I think he wasn't alone. I think the Mabons sort of had this, and I know, again, that my Uncle Bill, if any of you know him, he's a laugh a minute, and that's no exaggeration at all. He's quite the funny guy. And my Aunt Mary, who is here tonight, and Uncle Bill, when they get together, it's like a comedy team. So definitely the sense of humor was part of the Mabon mystique, but it didn't always serve him well. He was, I guess, purveyor of 1,000 voices. When he was in high school, he was able to imitate anyone. And I understand it got him into quite a bit of trouble in high school. And from what I've been told, that it was the combination of Foster, Burkhart, and Mabon that made it to the principal's office quite a few times, not in a flattering way. And here's the guy who will end up to be superintendent of schools for the diocese. So a little bit of irony there. But his sense of humor has served him well throughout his life. But, you know, they say that what goes around comes around, because I'm also a Mabon, and I inherited some of that sense of humor as well. And just as fate would have it, he was the superintendent of schools when I was going through elementary school at St. Clements. We're right here in Johnstown. And, I'm not somewhat ashamed to say that I've made several trips to the principal's office. In fact, my sister Marcia, who was at St. Clements with me, was berated for her brother having the lowest conduct grade in the history of St. Clements. Backed her up against the wall. And they never really looked at Judy they always looked at her with a lot of skepticism too. I think they were wondering if it was a result of the gene pool or whether we emerged from a cesspool. But it wasn't a really good. I had, to put it nicely, a checkered career at St. Clements. But my point, where I'm leading this is, he was the superintendent of schools, and he still came to our house once a month. And the amazing thing was I didn't hear much about it. What I heard was encouragement and guidance. I was never made to feel that I was an albatross around his neck, which I probably already felt, but he never made me feel that way. He extended to me love and acceptance that a family member should. And speaking here as part of the family, I feel that I need to bring that out because that's really what my Uncle Tom's all about. He's quite the lover, and he's quite the individual that showed that to my family in many ways. I think that his capacity for love came from the Mabon family. And again, if you know any of them, there was my dad, Frank, Bill, who I've mentioned, Nancy, Kath, Tom, and Mary. All of them were just outstanding. They had a look in their eye when you talked to them, and it was like you were the only person in the world. And that you were okay. No matter what you did, you were okay. They exuded that love. And they all had it, but I think he had it more. St. Paul wrote that many gifts are given to us. Among those are faith, hope, and love, charity. And the greatest of those is love. And I think that might have been an inspiration to him earlier in his life, because I believe that's how he lived his life. Uncle Tom was a tremendous support for my family, especially my mother. When, as life progresses, you lose people that are, that you count on in your life, that are important in your life. And the first event I can think of is the death of my father. My mother was 50 years old. This was 1973, and she had 2 kids in high school, 1 kid in elementary school, a kid in college, and 2 out with a limited means. And although she did have a support system that helped her, her brothers and sisters, one of which is here today, Uncle Tom made it a point to make sure that she had everything she needed. That if anything slipped through the cracks, he was there to take care of it. And it was a real dire need, a time of need for my mother, and he stepped forward and really did a yeoman's effort to really make sure that she landed on her 2 feet, which she did. 4 years later, I was dumb enough to get into a major auto accident, and I learned later that in the emergency room, the nurses were telling my mother, "You need to prepare yourself because there's a very good chance that he may die." Now here I am, a 22-year-old son who really shouldn't die before his mother, yet here she was. But when I woke up from my operation and my time in the hospital, I was in intensive care, and the first people I remember waking up to was my mother and my sister. The next person was my Uncle Tom. And he was insulted that I called him Father, that I didn't call him Uncle Tom, and he thought, gee, Jackie didn't recognize me. There's something wrong here. He's whacked. That's it. There's some major stuff. But again, supporting us, supporting our family where we needed it, when we needed it, and making sure that he followed up was a big part of the love that he's impacted our lives with. The third episode is the death of my brother Jim. It was a tragic death at age 44. He was quite the guy, and the events leading up to his death, he died of a liver disease, but the events leading up to his death put my Uncle Tom in a difficult position. Jimmy remained a Christian his entire life, but he had turned his back on a few of the the Catholic traditions that we all grew up with. But despite that, my Uncle Tom did what was best for Jim at all times. Showed him nothing but love, forgiveness, and compassion all the way to the end, and blessed him, prayed for him, did for him what he would do for any one of us. And I mean, that is true love, and that's true support that he provided for us. I guess I'll just mention one final thing, and that is my Uncle Tom hit a difficult time in his life. He was faced with a crisis, and it was about as inspirational as it can be to me to watch a good man face a personal crisis with dignity and confidence that God and the Blessed Mother were behind him through the entire time, and that he had the strength, being personally accused, to forgive his accuser, which is, to me, about one of the best examples I can think of an example of love for your fellow man. So, with that, let's bring this up to the positive a little bit. My sisters are very resourceful and ingenious, and they worked it so that we could have the mayor of Johnstown consider proclaiming today to be Msgr. Thomas Mabon Day. And I have right now the proclamation from the mayor of Johnstown that today, June 3rd, 2007, is Msgr. Thomas K. Mabon Day. Well, I'll leave this up here, and I think I'll turn it over to my Uncle Tom.
Those of you that would like a photo with Msgr. Mabon in the proclamation can do so after the program. I know, speaking on behalf of the Our Mother of Sorrows family, Msgr. Mabon, like he has been for his own family, has been there for all of us in times of great sadness and great joy. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the man of the day in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, Msgr. Thomas Mabon.
leave? Jackie, I want to say that in all humility, I just wish all those things you said were true.
Pay me back someday.
But I am truly grateful for your sentiments, and I just hope that in some small way I can live up to them. I think I'm expected to say something funny, but the occasion really doesn't lend itself to that, because when accolades are directed to somebody, one realizes how far short one really falls in the face of those, and how truly it can be said, how unworthy we are for the sentiments that are directed toward somebody that hits a point in their life that seems unusual. To be 50 years a priest, all I had to do was be here. And it just seems that when you're talking about a milestone in the priesthood and a milestone in any other kind of walk of life, the significance pales when you're speaking of priesthood and milestones, because you're talking about the eternal, and that's a far cry from any other endeavor anybody can be engaged in, no matter how lofty. Some things have been said unkindly about Teeny. There's been a certain derivative tone leveled at the name Karnak. All my cats were baptized Karnak. The last two were called Teeny, and when that cat died, the last one came along, was the ugliest, the most scrawny, God forbidden looking cat you ever saw in your life. It's a kitten. So I didn't have to go through the pains of another name. So I thought, well, I'll call him Teeny after his predecessor. And I'm telling you, talk about having something to come home to. That doesn't say much in some respects for the ambition of some people, I guess. But I'll tell you, I used to look forward to coming home at night, not because of Father Zeph or Father Angelo. Teeny! Teeny! And Teeny would come running. And it really was nice to have a pet. I remember somebody told me at the time that when I got Teeny, the fifth, well, I should get another cat to be a companion to him. But actually, I don't think there would have been room for another cat between Teeny and me. He was, I remember one time I got deathly sick. I got so bad, I had to call the doctor. I thought I had strep throat. I was fearful of that. So I called the doctor's office, and she said, he's not here, but he'll be calling back. And she said, I'll be in touch with you. So she called back a little later and said that he would stop off to see you on his way home. Well, I hadn't gotten out of bed that day, really. I felt so sick. So I was lying up there in bed, and out comes Teeny and jumps up on the bed and goes down to the bottom and turns around and assumes that meditative position that they do. And he wasn't seeking anything, he just was there. It was almost as though he sensed that things were real awry as far as I was concerned. So the doctor finally came up the steps. He came in and I said, I see you have an attendant here. Teeny never budged. He just lay there in the corner of the bed. The doctor ministered to me, lots of daggers and all that stuff, pain and agony I went through. And then finally left and I felt much better. But that was the story of Teeny. Now, what's this got to do with any of you? Well, I kind of wonder. But I think you really have to realize that there are soft spots in all of us, no matter how dire we may appear. I remember years ago that Mrs. Rosemary Green, I mentioned at Mass, said to me when she was giving me a check for the month, she said, "Now, Tommy," she said, "don't be like your father." Well, I immediately reared up, I said, I beg your pardon? She said, "Don't be like your father." She said, "Learn to smile." I never knew my father to be unsmiling. I had no idea what she was talking about. With us, he was always smiling and always jovial. I guess there was a certain austerity in business that he showed a little more straightforwardness, straightness. That amazed me, how we can so misread people. Because if anybody was jovial and friendly, it was we kids. We always used to run down. Are you interested in this? We always used to run down the corner. I think our mother trained us. And your father's coming home. Run down to meet him. But we did. We'd always run down the corner and meet Dad coming and walk back up the street with him home. And it was this kind of a part of him that we knew that nobody else probably knew. But the point, once again, is we can so misread each other. And this is where I think uncharitableness seems to seep in sometimes. Never really realizing that we really can't read people perfectly. And we know ourselves, when people talk about me, they don't really realize how mean I feel at times for the man in which I live my priestly life. It's not always been that faithfulness to Christ's love and his mandate to love one another as I have loved you. So, we know people don't understand us, but we're always too quick to worry about misunderstanding others. So I guess if there's any message I would give after 50 years, is to do just what Jesus said. Be to one another as I have been to you. And he loves us despite our failings, despite our emptiness, aside from our inability to relate like we should as Christ-like people. These things we fail at, and yet Christ never cancels us out. And that's why I think we should be able to smile and not be too miffed at the smiles that people show to others that we think don't deserve it. We don't know how they appear in God's eyes, and we misread them. As a consequence, we do an awful lot of damage, not only to them, but to ourselves, because we are holding within ourselves that which Jesus wants us to share, and that's love. The Trinity we celebrated today, we have the Father, we have the love of the Father, the Son, and the begotten Holy Spirit of God, source of love. So we have to adapt the same spirit in our own lives to be that source of understanding others as Jesus always understands us, and be ready and eager to give to others the generosity Jesus shows us. Lots of people here tonight I'm so very happy to see. Nancy Gable, our housekeeper for many years for Mother Sorrows, she was a great boon to us, and I often envied, or often felt bad for pastors or priests and houses and rectories who didn't have the benefit of a housekeeper like we had, Nancy Gable, back in there. And we certainly have that marvelous secretary, Mrs. Mall, Gloria Mall. She never answers the phone in a tone other than absolute cheerfulness. She must be a marvelous actress. Because I have never called that she doesn't sound like, oh, she's really so delighted that I called. And that's what she was everybody. And that's another example of how we should be with one another, even when we don't feel like it, or don't think anybody deserves it, but she does. Certainly the last couple of days, Mrs. Shorto has been a source of great example of patience, tolerance, and eagerness to forego. And I think that's an awfully generous. As a matter of fact, this whole affair, starting with the pastor, was such a great source of admiration for me about eagerness to make other people happy, and to look upon that as something to be sought after. I think that certainly is what we should all be after. Not ourselves, but to make it nice for somebody else, even though there may not be something in it for ourselves. So I'd like to be funny and leave you with something to laugh at, but as you know, I don't have much of a sense of humor, as they kept telling tonight. So I'll just leave you with this little thought to I guess as the kids say, what would Jesus say in our relationship with one another? How would Jesus treat so-and-so? And we all know I should do the same. Thank you so very much. God bless you all.